What is your name?
Roxanne Anderson, or Rox.
All right, Rox, thank you for being here.
Of course.
What pronouns do you accept or use?
I accept and use they, them, their pronouns.
Do you use any of the other pronouns?
I will respond to other pronouns, especially if it's because somebody lacks the information about what pronoun to use or what pronoun I prefer. So I will answer to anything that's respectful.
How long have you used they, them pronouns?
Oh, I've used they, them pronouns, I would say for a good 10 years, maybe 9 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Because most people have said at most 2 years.
Right. Well, it's because I have a unique situation in that, I worked at District 202, which was a buy-in for youth community center in Minneapolis. And so, youth are usually way ahead of the curve, and youth started using they, them pronouns probably 15 years ago. And so I think it's probably been within the last 7 years that I felt really strongly connected to they, them pronouns, and probably 9 years or so since somebody first started saying, you're not really she or he, what about they or them, or a neutral pronoun. And so I think that it's probably been about probably 9 years or so.
Your name, Rox or Roxanne, have you always gone by that name?
Really been within the last 12 years or so, 10, 12 years or so, that people call me Rox most often. And people that are really close to me might call me Andy, which is more of a masculine identity or a masculine tendency that I have. And so sometimes folks call me Andy.
How much responsibility do you think should be put on others to ask your pronouns, or for yourself to tell others?
I think it kind of depends on a person's knowledge level. If you are part of leadership of the LGBT community, you should be always asking, period, no question about it. If you are somebody who doesn't know anybody who's LGBTQ, it might not be in your wheelhouse to even know to ask that question. So if you ever have had interactions with trans folks, then I think or folks that have a pronoun that you are not familiar with, then I think, most often it's up to an individual to ask how somebody wants to be referred, just like we ask about people's names.
In what ways do you express your gender, and in what ways do other people validate your gender?
Oh, I express my gender mostly masculine of center. I don't feel too comfortable in feminine clothes, and I never actually have. I remember when I was pretty little being just like, my mom would try to get me into a dress or pantyhose, and I would just try to get stiff as a board, and she would just kind of shake me into the pantyhose. It's not something that makes me feel comfortable being more feminine. There have been times in my life when I have the desire, my internal desire was really to strive to be feminine. And I tried really hard to do those things. But I feel most comfortable masculine of center, being, what the larger society might perceive as a tomboy. And so I think that what I project is masculine, and what people receive mostly is masculine.
And how do they validate that?
They validate it in all kinds of ways, mostly by referring to me in masculine tone. There are different ways in which we talk to men and women. And so people often talk to me in a more masculine tone. Sometimes people forget that I was assigned female at birth. And so if I'm talking on the phone, for example, to a customer service person, they might be reading my name as Roxanne, and in the beginning of the conversation, they're very consciously calling me she, her, and using feminine pronouns. But by the time we get done with the conversation, they've forgotten the piece of paper that identifies me as female, and they're just listening to the way that I talk, and they will often close the conversation with "Thank you, sir," or "Have a great day, sir," or "Okay, sir."
So what I think people who are watching this might be asking is, well, you use they them pronouns. So if someone is respectfully referring to you as he him in phone
Hmm.
conversations at least,
Sure.
so when do you say, well, I actually
It
prefer?
I don't usually. If it's just a customer service person, I'm not going to talk to them again. I don't actually. I, it's not worth investing that for me. It's not my job to educate that person. They're not in my path. They're not on my purpose. If it's somebody that I'm coming into contact with on more than one occasion, or somebody that I might believe will take that information and use it for the betterment of society, then I might stop to do the piece on education. But either folks accept you or they don't accept you, and it's not my job to really to give people an understanding. It's partly up to individuals to find out more, just like this art piece is about finding out more.
Mhm. But if I were to start using he him pronouns for you for the rest
Right.
of
For the
this
rest of
interview,
this interview, I would consider that disrespectful because we've already talked about it. You know that I have a preference with they, them pronouns. Now, what I know happens in a real way because we're human is we compartmentalize really easy, and we probably do that for a safety mechanism. But so if you're talking to me and you're listening to me and you're looking through your camera and you're just hearing me through the headphones and you slip up and call me he, or you use he pronouns because that's what you're hearing, I'm not going to take that as an offense. If you're being deliberate and we're somewhere and you're like he and you're emphasizing he
yeah,
because that's what makes
right,
you most comfortable, then that's
right.
an offense that I will challenge you on.
Well, how do you feel your gender identity relates to how society currently understands gender?
Oh, it doesn't at all. I think gender's kind of dumb, and I always have, even when I was a kid. I think for me, it's really connected to spirit and spirituality and how I'm moving through the day. And for some people, it's really about like I love wearing high heel shoes. You know?
Would you say that there are more individuals than there were 20 or 40 years ago who are trans?
No, I think that the same amount is probably there. I think what's different is people are being more vocal. People have a recognition. They have example. They have they're able to witness other people coming in to into that connection around gender, and there's way more information. So young people can get on the internet when they're 9 and have an idea that the way that they feel is not unlike maybe even somebody that lives even on their same block. And I don't think that that was the case 30 years ago. So I don't think that there are more transgender people. I think that there's just more knowledge about transgender individuals.
How do you feel race plays into gender identity and acceptance of someone's gender?
Well, I think that, often brown people aren't believed in general. And so if you put on top of that the idea that what people are perceiving about that person's gender is skewed, now you have kind of two strikes. And so I think that that's why we see the incredible disparities between communities of color who are trans and non-trans folks, or non people of color in trans community. And I think it's just because people of color have greater disparity in general. And I think when you put race and gender together, there's often a disbelief.
If you had to list 10 things in your life that you think about the most or that are the most important to you, 10 being the most important thing, where would your gender identity fit in?
-2. You know, I think the most important thing to me is connecting with those people that are my family. You know, my wife, my kid, my mom, my grandmother's about to turn 100, and so those things are the things that are most important to me. Um, Gender is something that only comes into play when it's being used against me.
What message or advice might you have for youth who might be questioning their gender identity?
Listen to your core, to the silent part on the inside, and hear what that message is to you, because it will come to you.
What advice do you have for parents who have youth or children who might be questioning their gender identity?
Listen to your kids. Most often, trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary people will state pretty early on that they are or they aren't something, and then get redirected by that. I remember my mom telling me that a behavior that I was doing wasn't very ladylike, and very defiantly, I, stomped my foot and told her I was no lady. You know,
It's very apparent that you are a leader in the community and that you make sure that your voice is heard and that you're willing to put work into something so that people hear you.
Mhm.
Can you tell me more about what means a lot to you and how you show that in the community?
I think one of the things that means the most to me is art. People being able to reflect, to heal trauma and pain. The slogan "Art changes everything" is like almost like a daily mantra to me, and so the way in which I can often show up is through engagement with artists, for artists, about artists, and that's what I love to do. I also own a coffee shop, and I own that coffee shop because kind of the other part of my passion is around a community connection point, being somebody who is, I'm kind of like a pollinator. I'm a little butterfly, and I want to make sure that everybody knows who everybody else is. And so I have a coffee shop, and we have that coffee shop because it's connected to the Minnesota Transgender Health
Right.
Coalition.
Can you tell me more about the Minnesota Transgender Health Coalition?
Sure. We started in 2007. It was a group of activists, mostly from Minnesota, who were concerned about trans folks being able to access healthcare systems. And so those folks worked with the University of Minnesota, who brought in, trans activists and organizer Leslie Feinberg. And Leslie helped the University of Minnesota and folks in community really kind of suss around this idea of trans folks taking healthcare into their own hands. And so the Minnesota Transgender Health Coalition's been around for 10 years. We just got a congressional letter from our Congressman Ellison, who gave us a shout out for the work that we've done. And that work has really been about harm reduction. We do HIV testing, we do support groups, we have a food shelf, a clothing shelf, and really act as a resource for trans and gender nonconforming folks.